Hey everybody, Professor Steins here, and today I'm kind of here to talk about Entity Framework, code first, creating a new database based on code alone. So in the other videos that accompany this week's material, what we do is we create a database in Visual Studio kind of by scratch, and then write some controls that could read and write from it. Well, what would be really neat though, instead of manually keeping track of our database elsewhere, would be to use the code first approach to Entity Framework to provide a way that we can just kind of declare classes based on what we want our database to look like, and then generate that database pretty automatically based on our code. So what I got out here on MSDN site, and hopefully Google will get you here, Entity Framework code first to a new database. The ERD I'm going to be looking at is going to be kind of similar to this. We're just going to kind of talk about Entity Framework, how it can be used, and then try to encourage you to use it as well. And it really could make morphing your website a whole lot easier and scaling up a whole lot easier as you further define your ERD in future labs. It's kind of advanced though, and there's a lot of ways that this can go wrong, and so I'm going to really hope that this video stays on point to pretty much try to walk through at least how I would do it, and I've done it a couple times now, to generate a static site. So to get started, in the other videos, I kind of just show you to go into new website. Instead, I'm going to do a new project this time. The first option up there at the top is going to be a web project in ASP.NET Web Application 4.5. Now this screen might look a little bit different depending on yours, but make sure that over here on the right that Application Insights is turned off, and you'll want to give your application a name. So I'm just going to call this KMP. I always talk about Keith McDonald because it's in all my labs. So this is going to be my KMP application. It's going to serve as their website. It's going to have a database in it and does some magic stuff as well. So it's going to create a solution and scaffold out a little bit, and we get a better chance to kind of choose some more options in here. I'm just going to go with empty for nothing right now. Web Forms is going to come with some stuff scaffolded in that makes it a little complicated. MVC will attach a little bit later. You can feel free to play with them. So empty website, no authentication. If you want to try the scaffolded out bit, make sure I would probably start off by turning authentication to nothing. That'll keep it a little bit simple. Make sure Azure is unchecked, regardless of which one you choose. Even under empty, you could just say Web Forms there. So at least it'll give you a little bit of a scaffold. So this is my KMP website, web application, and hopefully it won't take too long to scaffold out. Again, EF is really great for creating and managing databases pretty automatically. So this is what we get off the bat. Not a whole lot there, not even really a default.aspx page or a master page. Just to play around, I'm going to create a web form and just call it default.aspx. Have it added to the application. And look at the code behind, make sure that it's okay. And we'll just start with hello world. This is going to be a lot like creating a new website from scratch. One of the big differences here is that all of our references are taken care of. Our assemblies that we need are kind of already there. We even already have a models folder in our app data folder ready and to go for our use. And that's my Firefox kicking up with website. Hopefully it'll come up and say hello world, which it did. So I'm going to go over to the models folder that came with our site, and we're going to add a new item here. Or, well, hold on, going a little bit too quick. Before that, down here at the bottom, I should have an option for Packet Manager Console. If you don't see it down there at the bottom, you can go up to the Tools for NuGet Packet Manager, Manage NuGet Packages for Solution, or just Packet Manager Console. That should make it show up down here at the bottom. And what we're looking for here is To install the entity framework, I'm going to use I was going to do it by command line, but I'm going to run it through Manage Packages for Solution. I hit Browse here. We'll see our entity framework. Make sure we add it to our solution and install it. That way we can use it. You can also run it from Packet Manager Console down here, package-install entity framework. I think that would work. So it's in there. You can also run some updates to some stuff that might be out of date. I think we'll try it just to make sure. Install-package entity framework. Yeah, so it's already been installed. That's good to go. We could check in references and make sure that it is in there as well. It should be in there. Yep, entity framework in the SQL Server. Now we can right-click on Models and add a new item. If we look on the Data tab here, it's not really a web file. We're going to be looking at the Data tab, and we want to create an ADO.NET entity data model. And we want to call that what we want to call it. I'm going to call it Newsmaker. We could call it My Blog or whatever we really want to call this this data set. I'm going to call it Newsmaker. It's going to contain our articles and categories and possible other entities that work inside of our news application. And it's going to give us some more options here. We could model it off of a database that already exists, or we can try to use a little graphical thing, which is very difficult to use and timely and whatever, but empty code first model is going to be really great for setting up a new database that we have not created yet. If you already have a database, you can use this tool to generate code based on your database, but we don't have a database yet, so we'll just go with empty code first. So when we did that, what it scaled out for us is we now have a Newsmaker CS file, and it opened up. It is part of the namespace of our application, so our application is named KMP. The namespace for this is in the models namespace. Newsmaker is our DB context. We are extending the DB context and calling it Newsmaker. It's kind of overriding that and sending this back up to the base. Now, this name equals Newsmaker here is going to match the connection string in the web config file. And it also got created automatically to point to our local DB, MS local DB, and then point to our models catalog and some other stuff saying that it's using entity framework. So it scoped out a lot of stuff for us pretty automatically, and that's good. It's even got some explanations about what's going on in here, and it's also got some commented out code. So we're going to start down here probably towards the bottom and create classes similar to what's commented out. So a public class for category, and that class is going to have a public int category ID, and we're going to want to expose some get and set methods for pretty much each of these variables. So a string for the category name, get and set, public string for the cat query, for the query string, get and set, and then another int in there for cat order to be like a custom ordering. So that's one category down, and it's looking pretty good. We're also going to want to create a class for articles as well. So public class article, and it's also going to have a definition that we're going to want to expose. A public int article ID will be the primary key. So expose some get and set methods for that. Public string headline to be the headline that we want to get and set. Public string date time for or that's public string datetime, public datetime for post date, and when the article gets posted, get and set, and maybe a string for summary. So we have our two classes, and they sort of relate to one another, don't they? If we went through into our app data folder and created our database like we did maybe in some of the other videos, we would need to create a foreign key primary key relationship between the article and the category. So that would be stored as an integer in the database, public int category category ID, get and set. One of the neat things and maybe problematic things about .NET is that it does, in doing this entity frameworks thing, is that it sometimes will automatically wire in category to category to category ID. However, what we need to do as well is create kind of a pathway for that to happen. So we have a category ID that's going to represent that category, but we also need to define a public virtual, which is going to act as kind of a loose object association here. It's going to tell the database it needs to create a primary key foreign key relationship. So it's a virtual definition for category, and it's going to seem a little weird here, category, get and set. So we have a local definition for category. It's going to be a category object. It's a virtual path, and it's going to wire in pretty automatically category ID to the category table and category primary key. So that might be a little bit complex, but it can also go back the other way. For example, a category like say sports could be associated with lots of different articles. So one way to do that is to, there's going to be no primary key in the category table for each, or no foreign key in the category table, but there will be a virtual path, just like we defined for category in the article table for category to have a list of articles, or list of object article, and we're going to call it articles. So articles will be the list, the type is article. I'm going to throw a little bit of an error here, and the reason why is that we just need to include a using systems.collection.generic. If we right click and do the refactor, it'll get added to the definition at the top. So we've got two entities, pretty basic. We have some virtual paths that relate the two together, and so this is all pretty peachy and good. If we come down to the packet manager down here at the bottom, or well, hold on, we need to do one more thing. All right, so we have our articles made and defined. Going back to the DB context, which is what this class was originally named as, and that's what we're passing to the class that we're overriding, DB context. We need to expose our objects to the DB set, and that way they get wired in. So there's another comment up here that came in by default, and we just need to make sure that we define our virtual lists of type DB set. Going to be category, and we'll call it categories. Will be the local name of it, and get and set. And we'll want to make one of those for the articles as well. DB set article, articles, get and set. Alright, neat. Neat. Let's try to put this into action a little bit by typing in down here at the Packet Manager console at the bottom, enable migrations. And hopefully this will come back and not throw you a whole lot of errors like it did for me. It's pretty neat. It's going to see if the database is there. It's going to try to build it up a little bit. One of the other things that we could do is try to build our software application. I don't know if we should be doing it at the same time. Hopefully for Packet Manager Console we get back Code First migrations enabled for Project KMP, and that would be a good thing. When we ran that, it created a migrations folder in our solution with a configuration CS file. And this is a little bit what it looks like. We're not going to touch it right now. I'm just going to close it. So, let's open up our Hello World. Let's throw maybe an ASP literal control out on the page, label out, run at server. And in the code behind for that, we're going to want to use that DB context we made. Now what might be kind of neat, and it might not work right away, is if you come over here to Server Explorer and hit Data Connections, you should see a sort of a database in the list here, and it's got our DB context, which was Newsmaker, and hopefully my video doesn't crap out and burn. Okay, it might not be ready yet. And let's try to put it into action a little bit, see if we can't make it work. So, to do that, in our code behind file, we're going to use a using clause. Going to call our variable DB for our database, and that database is going to be a new instance of the Newsmaker application. I think we need to, add using, if we want to shorten this up a little bit, kmp.models. So we're looking in our application in the models collection, and we're going to be making a new, should see Newsmaker in there now. So that's a new Newsmaker. And if we make it, then we'll get inside of here. And if that's the case, let's try to insert something into the database. So let's make a variable and call it my cat. And it's going to be a new category. That's because that's our object. We use brackets here, square or curly brackets, not parentheses, because it's kind of a static thing here. So cat name is going to be to something like sports, comma, cat order maybe to cat query, lowercase sports, semicolon on the end. So we should have a new cat, my cat, and based on those values. And it's actually kind of straightforward. We want to db.categories.add my cat. db.save changes. So hopefully that will do something in our application when we try to call up our home page. Let's build the solution. Now you'll end up finding you spend a lot of time building solutions when you use the application way, but it does help name resolve all that crazy nonsense. Let's see, let's right click, view in browser Firefox, let's let it kick up and roll again. Visually speaking, it's probably still just going to say hello world if it doesn't throw an error. Let's hope it doesn't throw an error. So we added migration, and I guess didn't like something. Let's go back to, we enabled migrations. Let's, in the Packet Manager console down here for the NuGet Packet Manager console, update database. Yeah, you got to be sometimes careful with this. It's kind of saying we can change the automatic migrations to true, but we didn't hit that part yet. Let's run UpdateDatabase from the Packet Manager console, though. Hopefully this will go pretty well. Well, it looked like it worked. Automatic migration is enabled. It's disabled. Alright, so maybe we do got to go back to configuration file and turn this to true in order for this to work. Let's build application, build solution, and then refresh. Yeah, like I said, I'm not super great in this. I know once you get it going, though, it's a darn right beautiful thing. And the fact that it is taking a long time is probably a good sign. So hello world worked. That means we got to this page. Hopefully if we look into our database in Server Explorer, this guy will probably hopefully work now. Refresh to open it up. Tables. There's a migration history table. What this guy has in it is a hash based on how we change our entities and stuff. And you kind of see it's not really going to have a whole lot of rear view value for us, but if we look at categories table data, we should see our sports in there. So that's pretty neat. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Another neat thing that you can do is that if the entities end up changing at some point, like if we look at articles, we didn't create a field in here for full text or something like that, the whole kit and caboodle. So one of the things we could do, we come back to Newsmaker CS and scroll down, and we can add our string in here, public string full text, to better define what our entity is going to look like. Now when we do that, we'll want to go back to Packet Manager console and run UpdateDatabase again. And hopefully that'll all go pretty well. Running seed method. So if all goes well and we just right click and do refresh here, we should see our new field being added to the database. Likewise, if we needed to take that field out, we decided that we're not going to need it, and you rerun UpdateDatabase, hopefully it doesn't throw an error. Yeah, sometimes it'll say whatever set to allow migration data class, migration data allowed. You could add that as a option here. Automatic migration data loss allowed is equal to true. Update database. That would get rid of that error for us. So let's refresh over here on the right. It should be gone now. And we could always just add it back if we needed to. So this is really helpful in the early stages of trying to get an application off the ground. It gives you a lot of flexibility in how you could build your ERDs on the fly. The configuration file also has a seed method, and you can see that it's trying to run a seed method down here. And it's got a little example in there to show you how that works as well. What's pretty neat about it is if you want to make a choice in here, something like that, if context dot categories any, let's see, I gotta go back to mine. This is a pretty neat way of style doing it. If not any, if we don't have any categories, it's supposed to be an exclamation point. Well, if we don't have any categories, then context.categories.add well, add or update. Trying to follow multiple ways at the same time. And bring that down a line or two. Now we could just kind of go back to default CS. This is our new category. So I could just kind of copy that guy over and put it there. A new category. Now we might also need to include using kmp.models here. It'll shorten up our notation. We don't have to use it on the front of category. So we add one category, add two category, separated by commas. The second one is music. Cat order is 1. Capital music. Yeah, so context. I don't think we have to, maybe we do have to save changes there. So let's try to run update database this time. Update database. I might have wanted to build this solution first before I did that, but we'll see what happens. So if we do Zot, let's go back to default CS. We need to probably take this guy out, at least not save changes anymore. Instead, let's try to print something out on the page so we can see what our database is doing. So this is going to be using a term called link, L-I-N-Q, link, language integrated query for kind of what we're accomplishing here. We're dealing with objects. So my query, I can build out a query. It's very similar to, well, maybe not very similar, but it's somewhat similar to SQL. So from B, and we haven't defined B yet, in DB categories. So this is we're looking for a B in a set, and the set is DB categories. So if we're in that set, and we're going to order by the set B by cat order, and we're going to select what's left in the set. Kind of cool. Anyway, var myout is going to be a variable. We're just going to hold to print something out on the page, and eventually we're going to want to set the label out on the page equal to what's in text is equal to this variable myout. We need to execute that query. Technically, we sort of did. Query is going to be holding the results of what was returned from it. If you look kind of over it and see what that variable is, it's a kind of a list of categories. So for each of those, for each var item in that return set in the query, myout plus equals an h3 tag with the item's cat name in it. And then of course you could get really weird by kind of reserving or using or intermixing any of the fields that were exposed from your object, cat order, cat query, cat ID. So we'll just say cat name to display it on the page, make sure see this sucker in action. H3. Alright, so let's go back and refresh. I might have wanted to rebuild my application again. When you're using the app feature in Visual Studio, building happens a lot. So we'll let that build occur and then come back and refresh. Let's hope that something gets printed out here. Hopefully it won't take forever. Cool, so we got 4 sports. Really, they probably all showed up from when we did it here. If we go back to categories and show table data, we can just delete those rows that are there. Delete. Oops, I didn't hit the delete button, but I didn't hit yes. So those things are gone. Let's refresh page. Again, this page isn't having anything to do with it. But what's really neat is if we needed to kill off the database or rework something, we could do update database, and the seed method would run, and we'll get our values from the seed in configuration.cs. Again, only got it set to run when categories is empty, because not every time that you're making database updates you're affecting every entity. Once I've set a few categories, I'm probably okay. If you wanted to come in and add, if not the context of the articles has any, and then do something kind of similar, context articles, add or update, and split it down, new article, commas in between them. You could really throw in a lot of test data, and what's neat is as you continue modifying your DB and building your entities up and trying to make them look cool and neat. Context.save changes, probably missed that. On the outside. If we wanted to go through create article, we'd have to make every field though, headline, post date, category, whatever. Should be full time, yeah, okay, full text. We just need to add those in there pretty much like we did the other ones. I'm using parentheses there, but really I guess that should be square brackets. That way we can sort of statically map a headline to something. You need to be careful kind of doing this too. One of the things that can go wrong here is that if you don't necessarily supply fields for every single thing, when you run update database, database, it might throw an error for us, it might not. It looks like it did. And it's probably for errors being marked as null. Run seed method, statement has terminated. Kind of view through the stack trace, see if we can't find exactly where everything started going wrong. Definitely in the seed action. I'm going to presume that it's just because article is not fully set out. So headline, let's set this down on multiple lines. Headline is that, post date, and today is 2017-02-04. Summary is equal to hello world. Category ID is going to be equal to what we've created in the first one, which I might actually need to go and check. 5 and 6. And you might want to set category ID equal to 1 on one of these guys. I don't know if it's going to let us do that. And that way we can be sure we're setting it to a good value here. And let's take the extra articles out. So just really the one. Maybe this will work a little bit better. Update database. Didn't really like that one. Generally speaking, didn't like that one, I guess. So I could just say new date, I think. I think that would be probably enough to get today's date. Let's rebuild. Yep, and update database. It's still having a problem in there. Date time to date timestamp resulted in out of range value. Yeah, I think it's having a problem converting date time over here. This is the error message that's coming out. The easy way to fix that, just to make sure that we're all kind of on the right page, may be to go back to just a static date and save it, but then go into our Newsmaker CS just to see if it works. There's something in that conversion that's going weird. Let's try UpdateDatabase again. Just want to make sure our seed method works pretty well. It's still throwing an error. It might be something I have wrong in articles altogether. Anyway, I hope it gives you an idea kind of how to get in there. Let's take this sucker out. It could be it as well. Although I'm pretty sure it's still a foreign key issue between the two tables. Anyway, I could get lost in it for a long time. Let's go back and look at what is in the page that we started with, Entity Framework Code First to a new database. It's creating our database. We set it to auto update. We've made models. You can make models based on ERDs as much as you want to. We created a context, sort of going through and using Solution Explorer models folder to implement an ADO.NET deal. And it's telling you to do it a little bit differently here, maybe putting it in different files or something, and that's totally okay. This is what it would what got scaffolded out for us a little bit at the beginning, to do it all in one file. Our default page pretty much worked a little bit like this, to at least start sticking something in and printing it back out to the page. We kind of skipped this part. It all got scaffolded in pretty automatically. Then we enabled migrations and kind of did some configuration file to set the seed. There's probably something I'm missing in there about setting the seed. Different ways to kind of map it as well. Data annotations are really neat. You get down a little bit further, and it's talking about data annotations. It automatically created, and we go back and look at our table here. Now if we look at the fields, it automatically created our primary key fields just because the names were pretty similar. If you didn't want to use that convention and you wanted to use a little bit more of your own to make username be a primary key, all you need to do is put a little data annotation on top of it. There's really a lot you could do with those too, and you'll see a lot of these listed right here, and they really don't put enough emphasis on them so that you can see what's there. But it's a good way that you could tie in. See, there's a nice code example. We scroll down a little bit. So you could kind of tie in an error message that's associated with this field, how big or small it needs to be. There's really a lot of things that you could do with it. Max length attribute, it can only be so big, something like that. No, I didn't have an example. Make sure that it's required, that it's used. Some really neat stuff there. Anyway, I hope you found the video useful, and I really hope that you go out and play with Entity Framework with .NET. You'll see it a lot used in MVC. Really, we're just talking about models at this point. There is no controller folder, and there is no view folder. Pretty much our web pages are solving both of those problems by being associated there. Yeah, it's going to drive me nuts. One of the other things, hopefully we can get it thrown out there real quick. So if I go back to models and add a new class, what's neat here, just a kind of a plain class, I'm going to call it Newsmaker repository though, because Newsmaker repository is going to be a file that we're going to want to define our own classes in. That way we can come back and use it later. So to keep things a little bit short, I'm going to throw in the using up here at the top, kmp.models. So makes what our code needs to write a little bit shorter. Namespace is already set. This is going to be a class that is disposable. That way it gets released. It's a mechanism. We're going to override it. That's what this colon means. We're overriding this class. It's going to throw an error here at first because it's telling us that we're not actually calling the class that we're interfacing with method. So we're going to want to call it eventually. But first, let's make a private variable that's going to hold all of our Newsmaker content. That way we can relate to it, all of our context, and that's going to be a new Newsmaker. It should implement basically our interface and entity foundation so we can start affecting stuff. A good function to return might be public enumerable. So we're creating a list, of, let's just say, categories. And we're going to name this function. That's the return type. It's going to be a list of categories. The function is get categories because that's what we're going to want to get. And what it will return from the context is all the categories as a list. To list. Cool. Again, we're overriding iDisposable class here. We might be able to hit something. It might give us kind of a pattern down here that we can use to do that. Let's see if it makes it look kind of how we want it to look. Move this down, see a little bit more of it. And I think it did. Set them to false. We're calling the dispose. We're overriding dispose method. That should be okay. Now, what's neat about this is we go back to default.aspx. We're maybe looking to use a drop-down list like we did in the lab. And we want our drop-down list to have our categories in it, DDL cats. The other way we did it in the lab, we'd use an SQL data source, but we could use an object data source instead to read from that function we just defined. Get categories would return all the categories. So we're going to try to implement that through our object data source. We can just go over to split, configure data source here. Our business object is going to be our KMP. I don't see it in the list. Should be KMP Newsmaker repository. Let's go back and save and just build the solution. I'm probably not building the solution near as much as I probably should be. Let's see, there you go, built the solution up. Let's go back into configure data source to look at it again. Hopefully this time we'll get a better view. There's our KMP models Newsmaker repository class. It's going to implement it. Let's hit next. The method we're looking for is our get categories method we just created. So we'll finish that. And break that out on multiple lines. You'll see it's got kind of a select method. It's calling our get categories method, looking at our repository class. So I'm going to call that ODS cats. ODS cats. ODS cats. And over down here in the drop-down list, we'll need to add some new options in here. One of them being data source ID, pointing to our ODS cats data source, object data source. We're going to have a data text field, and that's going to be the cat name, and a data value field, which will be the category ID. Let's save it and try to run it and see what happens. I probably should have done build again. See if it works without build this time. Maybe. Looks like it might be trying to build. Got this nice little drop down list, music and sports. You can right click and inspect that. It should have built out our entity for us with all of our values we'll need in it. It's pretty neat. So just like in the other labs, you go in, you make an add page. It's going to be a lot similar to this. You just kind of create your object based on your values from the page. This would be like from a text box or something. And Entity Framework will do kind of all the magic for you. This isn't the only tutorial. It's probably worth following. There's so many out there. I'm just trying to focus on code first with Entity Framework. Again, there's lots of different even versions of using Entity Framework. We're looking at code first to a new database. If you're on this article, there's a video that describes it. Another good resource I found is Pluralsight. It's in D2L under the useful resources link, and it's got a nice 15-minute tutorial that'll look a little bit similar to what I've done in here as well. So anyway, encourage you to try it and use it. Definitely will make your life a whole lot easier and scalable. And you can change your objects and data source around pretty magically. You just need to run UpdateDatabase when you come down to the bottom. And I still got something wrong inside the article tab. I'm thinking I just need to find a better way to stitch it together. So categories should have something in it, and cat is 5. So maybe if we go back to configuration and change this to 5, it won't fail. The reason why is that it would be failing. Hey, it worked. It would be failing when because that foreign key does not relate back to anything that exists in the table. And we didn't really try to set a foreign key here. Category. I think we tried to do this and it did not like it. If we set category ID to 1, then set this guy to 1, and then dropped the data out of both tables. And articles table should have data in it this time from the last one. No. Well, maybe. Okay, we'll try it. Should have got something out of it that time. And I threw an error. It's throwing it on the second one, though, because I bet if we look back at show table data, and hit refresh, we might get 2 in there. That one fails. So if we're looking at configuration in the seed method, it's getting this part complete. Categories, this guy come through with 1 though? He came through with 7. Came through with 7. Yeah, running seed method. Should have got an article that time. Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. Neat. Anyway, hope you enjoyed Entity First. Again, lots of resources out online. ASP.NET website, MSDN website, Microsoft Developer Network website. So much resources. So, encourage you to try it and have a good one. Bye.